I run. It's the only thing I can do. I don't care where I'm going. I twist, turn, and crawl through the air vents and splash along sewer pipes, just trying to get as far away as possible. I tell myself it's for the safety of the others. I know it's really just to save my own skin. When the others find out what's really happened, they'll kill me for sure. Perhaps I deserve it, but I'm not going to wait around for it to happen. I enjoyed every minute of it. Every touch, every scream, every whimper, every drop of blood and bile. It was like a symphony of the senses. I shudder, images appearing in my mind as I duck under coils of cables and squeeze between filtration tanks. I want to bury myself in the industrial morass of the underhive. For hours, I keep moving in the same general direction, ignoring the squealing of the rats and the flutter of the things against my face in the darkness. Here and there, I pass through a lighted section, flickering glow globes, casting a sickly yellow light over a tunnel junction or sewer entrance. I abandoned my pack a while ago, unable to squeeze it through an observation hatch. I took only the rations I could fit in my belt, and the gold coins taken from the Inquisitor's stockpile in Furnace Forge. My flight takes me up and down through wells and sinkholes lined with algae, across swaying bridges of rope and wood, skirting the glow of fires and the indistinct babble of voices. I like this because I feel like this is where the story finally takes off. I feel like everything up to this has just mainly been exposition, which is okay. It's okay. It's okay. But now the story began. And it's not that long either. As I stop, as I'm crawling through a ventilation duct, it ends in a grill. And through the mesh of wire, I can see an open area beyond, brightly lit from above. It looks like some kind of forecourt. As I look to the right, I can see two large gates made from plates of steel, heavily riveted. There's a handful of orcs outside, carrying large caliber guns, and a few men with forge caps on, auto guns and las guns in their hands. Without trying, I've found von Strab. This is absolutely a major entrance to his domain. It's hard to see how the Imperial forces could have failed to find it after months of looking. Perhaps it's better hidden than it seems. This is the last place I want to be, on the edge of the fortress, the man I was sent to kill. This is perfect. Von Strab will give me sanctuary. He will protect me from the Colonel and the others. All I have to do is go and warn him, show him my good intentions. I don't want to kill him, not now. He is my savior. I kick out the grill, which clatters to the ground. The guards come running over. The orcs lumber up behind, grunting and growling. I throw up my lasgun and hold my hands in surrender. Who are you? Demands one of the sentries, a young man with a pointed black beard and a tattoo of a dagger on his cheek. What are you doing here? I need to see the Overlord, I say, lowering my hand. I have important news for him. You can tell me, the guard says. No, it's too important, I reply. I have to speak with von Strab himself. I'm from outside the hive. I can see you're an outhiver, the man says, glancing over his shoulder towards the gate. Curfew's on. I can't let anybody inside, especially not some outhiver stranger. I step closer, fixing the man with an intense stare. This is important, I say to him, speaking slowly, earnestly. The Overlord could die if you don't let me see him right now. You can't ignore this. Not with witnesses to say that you met me. The man shuffles nervously. He looks at his companions, who offer him only shrugs and shakes of the head for support. The orcs look on, bemused, perhaps not understanding the conversation. They look to the man I'm talking to, waiting for the order to smash me to a pulp. I toss my knife to the ground in front of him. I spend a moment wistfully remembering the feeling of the sharp blade slicing through Laurie's white skin. I recall carving an elegant tracery of red on the canvas of her naked body. I'm unarmed, I say, focusing on the matter at hand. You can search me. I will, the guard says. So then you let me in? If the Overlord is displeased, you'll die before me, he says with a scowl. Follow me. He turns, and the whole group of us troop through the gate. One of them has picked up my knife and lasgun. I can see now that there's a watchtower behind the gates, mounted on the sides of a white marble pillar that stretches up to the roof. The snouts of 3 heavy weapons poke through vision slits, cut into the sheet metal. The sentry leader signals to the tower, and I hear a shuffle. A short while later, metal grinds on metal, and the gate is pushed open. The man grabs me by the arm and leads me inside. With a clang, the gates shut behind me, and I see 2 men lowering a thick iron bar into place. The 4 of us are in a wide plaza, lined with marble pillars, littered with broken and toppled columns and statues. Cracked flagstones line the floor, thick red moss growing between them. At the far end, a wide set of steps leads up, almost made of marble, carved from wood. They are decorated with imperial eagles that have been burnt and hacked at, the symbols of the emperor defaced. Headless busts of saints line the stone wall, obscene graffiti scrawled over the frescoes of great triumphs of the distant past. Guttering torches are mounted on the pillars, and in the shadows, I see movement. I can hear grunts and crude barking words. More orcs. The guard leads me up the steps and opens a small ported door on the cathedral entrance, pushing me through before stepping behind me. The inside of the cathedral is crumbling and ruined. Tapestries have been torn down from the walls and scorched. The stained glass windows have been shattered. More torches and scones bathe the interior with fluttering red light. 4 more men emerge from the left of us to join. They wear red forage caps too and makeshift uniforms scavenged from various imperial regiments. Strip, the man says. I pull off my headscarf and drop it to the ground, and follow with the ragged clothes taken from the tool merchants. I stand naked while they search the garments. They find the rations in my belt, and then one of them empties out the pouch containing the gold coins. What do we have here? Says the man in the white tunic. Gifts for the loyal soldiers of the Army of Liberation, I say. They look at me with suspicion for a moment, and then their greed takes over. They count the coins and divide between them, hiding them away in pockets and pouches. Okay, get dressed, says the bearded man. This done, he leads me through the pews on which more men slept, gray blankets still over their forms. A few wake with coughs and snorts and watch us as we walk down the aisle towards the overturned altar at the far end. This way, he says, pointing to a winding staircase that leads up to the right. Halfway up, the staircase is replaced by a metal ladder, which enters a hole in the roof. The ceiling is shored up with metal beams and timbers. There are cracks in the plaster and stone, evidence of the great weight that crushes down on the ancient cathedral. That's how it is in the Underhive. One generation's homes become the sewers and basements of the next, and then another layer is built right on top of that, and another and another. For thousands of years, the hive grows, its foundations the rubble of the buildings below, until it becomes the mighty tower that today stretches up to the clouds. The ladder leads us to a small bare room with a single door leading from it. Following the guard, I walk through the door into a narrow corridor, lined with portraits that have been scrawled over and ripped. At the far end of the gallery, we pass through another door and down a short flight of steps. For several moments we walk, sometimes passing the silent machines of a factory workshop. Other times we return to the spires of the cathedral, up ladders and downstairs through the maze. I wonder if he's deliberately taking me along the long route, trying to disorient me. If he is, it's working admirably, because I haven't got a clue where I am now. He brings us to a halt in a small chamber with a thick red carpet on the floor, muddied and trampled by many booted feet. A low couch lies along one wall, with a small table next to it. On the table sits a crystal decanter and a glass. Sit down, he says, directing me towards the couch. I do as he says, and he pours a clear liquid from the decanter into the glass and hands it to me. That's very civil of you, I say, sniffing the liquid. It's odorless. It's water, he explains. The overlord insists that his visitors be refreshed when he greets them. Very sensible, I say, not sipping the water. It can be poisoned or drugged. The guard sees my distrusting look, and with an annoyed sigh, he grabs the goblet from my hand and takes a swig. It's perfectly safe. What do you take us for, barbarians? He says. Still unsure, I take a small sip. It's clear, tasteless, unlike the scummy liquid I've been surviving on since boarding the starship over a year ago. Yes, yes, it really is fresh, the man says with a smile, reading my expression. The Overlord had a fuel tankers full before this unplanned migration. We managed to bring one with us. It's almost used up now, so make the most of it. I nod and thinks, and take another sip while the guard knocks gently on the door and then lets himself in. The door closes with a click behind him, and I can hear a muffled conversation. Suddenly, there's the sharp retort of a pistol, and something bangs against the door. The moment later, the door opens, and another man steps out, an old-style revolver smoking in his hand. This one looks mean, with a hard edge about his gray eyes. He has a scar above his chin, and his graying black hair is slicked over his head. He's dressed in a long gown of patchy purple velvet, the leather belt with a holster looking out of place around his waist. I stand up to meet him. I am Soronius von Spink, he says, with a cursory bow of the head. I am Emperor von Strab's Chancellor. Ex-Lieutenant Cage, formerly of the Imperial 13th Legion, I say, bowing swiftly, with my hands at my side, in the manner I've seen certain types of officers use in the past. The penal legionary, says von Spink, cocking his head to one side and examining me. How interesting. Can I see von Strab now? I say, it's urgent. The Emperor will see you in a moment, he says, emphasizing von Strab's new self-proclaimed title. Please, finish your water. We stand in silence, with me pretending to examine the interior of the antechamber, and von Spink blatantly looking me up and down, his brow furrowed. After what seems like a long while, he holsters the revolver. After a torturous wait, which must have been only a few minutes, but it felt like an eternity, there's a bellow from inside the door. Von Spink opens it, and I step through, almost stumbling over the body of the bearded guard who is lying next to it, blood dribbling out of the hole in his forehead. I apologize for the mess, murmurs von Spink, steering me forward with a hand on my shoulder, closing the door with the other. The Emperor does so like being disturbed at this hour. The walls of the short, wide chamber are hung with deep red drapes, looped over rails. It's only at a second glance that I notice the rails are made from wired together bones. The carpet underfoot was once white, but now is stained with mud, blood, and who knows what else. Two sets of double doors lead off to either side, and I note with fascination that the handles have been replaced with small jawbones. I look up and see a chandelier made from fused ribs, and I can guess what fat was used to make the candles by the distinctive smell. At the far end, sitting on a throne-like chair carved from dark wood, sits von Strab. Other than him and us, the room is empty. He is heavily built, his jowls wobbling as he sits forward to peer at me out of one piggy eye. The other has been replaced by an artificial lens, the glass and metal protruding from his pallid, veiny skin. He sits with his hands on his knees, in what is supposed to be a regal pose. The whole effect is somewhat spoiled by the fact that the so-called emperor is dressed in a grubby off-white bedrobe and a pointed nightcap, complete with tassel. Humble greetings, your excellency, says von Spink with a low bow. My profuse apologies for this disturbance. May I present Lieutenant Cage, a messenger from the outside? Von Strab lifts a hand and waves me forward. He speaks quietly, his voice strong and proud. Let me see you, he says, leaning forward. I stand in front of him, hands clasped behind my back, waiting patiently. He looks at me from toe to scalp, lips moving wordlessly. He gives a grunt and sits back. Ugly sword, aren't you? He says. Cage, I say automatically. What's that? says von Strab. Just call me Cage, Your Excellency, I say. And yes, my features are as harsh as my life has been. Well, Cage, don't keep me waiting, the Overlord says. What do you want? I have been sent here to kill you, I say. Von Strab recoils in horror, and instantly Von Spink is by my side, his revolver pointing at my temple. Do not move, assassin, says Von Spink. I sigh. Obviously, I'm not going to do it, I say, keeping my eyes on Von Strab. I'm here to warn you. Von Strab recovers slightly and peers at me suspiciously. He waves a hand at Von Spink, who lowers his pistol, though I note he doesn't holster it. Warn me? That you are sent to kill me? Says the Overlord. The rest of my team are still in the Underhive, and they intend to either kill you or abduct you, I say. And then, as if that would explain everything, we were sent by the Inquisition. The Inquisition, you say, says Von Strab. He laughs, a soft, gurgling sound. Well, that's no surprise at all, is it, Von Spink? No, Your Excellency, says the Chancellor Bodyguard. I imagine it is they who are responsible for the previous attempts on your life. Of course they are, I say. They think that the fate of Armageddon could rest in your hands. You are quite a threat to them. This team of yours, tell me about them. I tell them everything. I say everything about the last Chancellors, the Colonel, our journey here, and our arrival. I explained about Durflin Kiek and his tunnel system. I saved the best until last. And if we fail, then you're still doomed, I say. A Space Marine battle barge is readying to flatten the whole of Acheron from orbit. Von Strab accepts this with a nod. He rests his elbows on the arms of his chair and steeples his fingers under his chin. You're not surprised? I say. Of course not, says the Overlord. Everything they say is true. My grand army of liberation is fast becoming a force to be reckoned with. Do you think they haven't found me yet? Deserters like you? I'm always a step ahead of them. The rewards for loyalty to me are worthwhile, as I'm sure you'll find. I have 10,000 trained soldiers, natives and others, and 10 times that number as auxiliaries. The hive will be ours again. You can stop the Colonel, with my help, I say, stepping forward. Von Strab tenses, but I ignore him. There's nothing you can do about that battle barge. In less than 2 weeks, there'll be no hive to retake. Let me worry about that, Cage, says Von Strab. He smiles and nods. I think I like you, Cage. I think I'll let you live for now. For now, I say, raising an eyebrow. For now, he says. Be thankful for that. Now I must retire. I am bone weary. Von Spink will find you suitable quarters for tonight, and I'll see you bright and early in the morning. Oh, and make sure you get him cleaned up, Von Spink. He smells as bad as he looks. Yes, Your Excellency, Von Spink says with another bow. I'm sure we can accommodate your guest. He leads me through the door to the left, and we pass through a series of rooms, each decorated in the same macabre opulence as the audience chamber. One is a trophy room, and amongst the strange and mutated rat skulls, stuffed lizard heads, and other creatures are a number of human skulls and half-decayed heads. Hunting has always been the sport of the Emperor's forefathers, explains Von Spink, noticing my gaze lingering on the contorted face of a woman. I can see maggots crawling in her empty eye sockets, making her cheeks twitch into semblance of life. He refuses to let circumstances stand in the way of family tradition, and makes do with what he can. After passing through several rooms, Von Spink brings me to a bare stone corridor. The walls slimed with mold. Rickety wooden steps lead down a small basement, with barred doors leading off. Von Spink opens one and shoves me through. I bang my head on the low ceiling and can see a bare room, no larger than 2 meters square. Surely, Von Straub, I began, turning to Von Spink. He smashes me around the head with the butt of his pistol. I wake up. I wake up, my head thumping with pain. I raise a hand to my forehead to feel a lump the size of an egg and scab blood. It's dark. A thin trickle of light seeps out of a door in front of me. I stand up and crack the top of my skull against the ceiling. Crouching down, I crawl across the cold, hard floor, feeling with my hand in front of me. I feel the grain of wood on the door, and by moving to the left and right, I find that I'm in a cell just a little wider than my outstretched arms. Where am I? More to the point, how did I get here? I try to concentrate through the pain of my throbbing head, trying desperately to remember. I mentally recoil from the image of Lori and try to recall what happened after that. My memory ends in an air vent, looking at the gates to Von Straub's realm. After that, I haven't got a clue. I consider banging on the door, but disregard the idea. In my experience, if someone puts you in a cell, they intend you to stay there until they're ready for you to come out. If you make a fuss, you're just as likely to increase the length of your stay. With this in mind, I sit with my back to a wall, hugging my knees to my chest as I try to think. It's pointless. I can't remember a damn thing. I don't know where I am, whether I actually want to get out of here, or what's waiting for me beyond the corridor. As it happens so many times in my life, I'm left with just one option. I have to sit and wait to see what happens. I don't have to wait that long. Soon there's the rattle of a key on the lock, and it swings inwards, dim light streaming in. A man stands there in a faded purple robe, gun belt at his waist. Come and get washed up for the Emperor, he says, stepping back. Let's see if he's still approving of you this morning. I think it best to say nothing yet. Anything I do is bound to get me in trouble. If I just play it steady, go along with whatever happens, unless it gets life-threatening, I could come out of this without too much pain. I just hope this isn't a test later. I'm led out of the cell and up a set of steps, and we turn into a shower block. The water is freezing cold, but I don't mind. It's the first opportunity I've had to wash the grime of the ash wastes and the pipeline and the underhive out of my hair and from my fingernails. I realize just how filthy I am as blackened water spills down the plug hole. I'm not one to worry about getting dirty, but it is nice not to be caked in crap like this every once in a while. My rags have been replaced with robes of black silk, patched in a few places with a white belt. It feels airy and light, quite strange after a lifetime of combat fatigues and constricting uniforms. Lastly, there's a red forage cap, which I ram under my head. The Emperor will approve, I'm sure, says the scarred man, looking me up and down, and then leaning forward to straighten my collar. Follow me. He leads me through a succession of rooms decorated with ghastly human remains. Bones, foetid organs, and rotting skulls are all used to adorn portrait rails, chandeliers, doors, and furniture. The stench is unbelievable. It sticks in my throat. I try to hold my breath, but soon that doesn't work, and I resort to merely breathing through my mouth. Now I can taste the sickness in the air. We finally enter a crowded room filled with men and women of all ages, some dressed in simple robes like I am, others with gaudy officers' uniforms. Young boys wind through the crowd with tarnished silver trays. offering a selection of local delicacies. My escort has disappeared in the throng, and one of the serving boys comes over and prefers the tray before my nose. It is dominated by a pyramid of small, brown balls, edged with slices of meat. What's that? I ask, pointing at a small gray sliver of flesh. Sandrat bladder, he chirps, broiled over some oak branches, very bitter, they say. And those? I say, using my fingertips to pick one of the balls, which looks like excrement rolled in wood shavings. Oven roasted kernel, with a savory coating of fresh mudstool, the young waiter replies. Kernel, I say. The young boy sighs and despite being less than half my age, he gives me a superior look. It's taken from the loins of a funda, he says with a condescending tone. The loins, I say, plopping it back on the plate and wiping the grease from my fingers on the boy's white smock. It's a bullock, you mean? Must be rare. They each have 6. It is an acquired taste, answers the boy, with a mock sorrowful shake of his head, and turns away and melts into the crowd, in search of someone who's obviously acquired more taste than I have. The crowd is gossiping and mingling, but soon a hush spreads out from the far corner of the room. I shoulder my way through the people, earning myself an odd elbow in the ribs in the process, until I can see the front. I see a balding man, dressed in a gray greatcoat, lined with red thread. He wears a long parade sword at his belt, and a pistol grip, inlet with glittering gems, protrudes from a leather holster. If he ever tried to fire, it'd rip his palm to shreds. His right eye has been replaced with a mechanical implant, the lens glowing with inner energy. He has a napkin tucked into the front of his coat, stained dark red. The man took me from the cell that appears at his shoulder and plucks the napkin free, using a corner to dab a couple of specks with the corner of his master's mouth. Thank you, von Spenk, the man says, the crowd parting in front of him as he waddles forward. He sees me, and I flinch, not trying to catch his attention, but he marches straight toward me, and suddenly I'm right in front of him. Glad you could make it, Cage? He says, and my heart begins to pound in my chest. How the frag does he know my name? What the hell has happened to me? I trust that your new vestments are to your liking? I look down at the flimsy robe, suddenly uncomfortable as I realize that it barely hides my nakedness. I'm used to more of a uniform, I say, looking at the fat man and shrugging. There's an almost inaudible murmur of disapproval from the crowd. This robe belonged to the youngest half-son of His Excellency, Garbo von Strab, says the man in the velvet robes. It is an honor to wear it. Von Strab? This is Overlord von Strab? I'm about to open my mouth to apologize, but the Overlord speaks first. Nonsense, von Spink, says von Strab, pushing him away and stepping closer to me. He lays a beringed hand across my shoulder and turns me to face the crowd. Garbo was a noisome little prick who didn't even have the decency to scream when I throttled him. Cage is a military man, through and through, aren't you? I've never been more than a soldier, I say, hoping it doesn't look like I'm squirming too much. Such humility, booms von Strab. See, Cage is a fighting man, a veteran of the hack and slash of war. He doesn't want to throw off to some poxy boy lover. Take it off. I'll find you something better. Now? I whisper, take it off now? I'm not usually self-conscious. I spent untold hours in the shower blocks of a garrison or aboard a ship in front of fellow soldiers, men and women. But there's something about the expectation, the leer in the eyes of his lackeys that makes me want to keep myself covered up. Von Strab unbuckles the belt and whips up the robe. You've certainly got nothing to hide, Cage, he says, casting the silk robe aside. I stand there covering my troopers with my hands as a gasp ripples through the audience. Why, look at all these scars. I thought it might have just been your face. A short, thin woman steps forward. She is wearing a wig that makes her twice as tall as she should be. Are you intact? She asks, glancing suggestively at my crotch. I pull my hands away, and she titters and grins. Oh no, most intact. You there, von Gerstl, says von Strab, pointing to a man in a bright blue uniform with a thick mustache. His thinning gray hair plastered over his scalp, thinning with perfumed lotion. You've let a bunch of assassins into the other hive. I'm stripping you of your title and giving it the cage. The man stands mouthing wordlessly, his hands flapping ineffectively at his sides. Von Strab clicks his fingers at his henchman, and Von Spink steps forward with a revolver in his hand. A single shot through the left eye blows the man's brains out as he flops to the floor. As well as your title, I'm stripping you of your clothes, says Von Strab. Congratulations, Marshal Cage. Standing there naked, with everyone's gaze on me, I'm not sure what to do. I bow formally and murmur my thanks. Von Strab rounds on the crowd. Well, don't leave the man standing there with his pride hanging out, he bellows. The crowd surges around the dead man like scavengers, fighting each other to pull off the clothes. They pounce on me next, lifting me up and turning me as they dress me. Having been pinched, pulled, and spun around a few times, I'm deposited back on my feet a little unsteadily. I stand swaying in front of Von Strab. The uniform, with its bright blue jacket and red sash, is a little bit too big for me. The cuffs hang past my wrists. The hose wrinkles around my ankles. Splendid. Now you look like a Marshal of Acheron, says Von Strab. Once we're done here, you can assume your duties. Duties? I say. Well, Von Spink will fill you on the details, I'm sure, says Von Strab. But a damn good start will be hunting down these assassins of yours. The Emperor is listening to petitions from his court and judging a few cases brought to his attention by underhivers brave enough to dare enter his lair. While Von Strab settles a dispute between a small man dressed in a red smock with a golden laurel nailed to the flesh of his head and a tall, pinched-faced man with a ridiculous blue wig, Von Spink takes to me at once. You do nothing, he says, the finger of his hand digging painfully into my arm. If the Emperor asks anything, just say it is all in order and being looked after. I shall arrange the security around here. You just have to take the credit. Or the blame, I say. Look at him, Von Spink says, nodding towards Von Strab, who now has the two plaintiffs balancing one leg to see who falls over first. Centuries of intra-family breeding never gave him the best start in life. But this whole business with the beast has made him worse than he ever was. The beast? I stammer. Gazgul, you half-wit, snaps Von Spink, his voice a whisper. Didn't Oriel tell you anything? I stay silent, stunned by the question. How does he know Inquisitor Oriel? What have I gotten myself into? Look, he says, calming down. I'll make it simple for you. Oriel recommended the last chancers to me for this job. I'm the one trying to make sure this place doesn't get blown to hell and back. So for Emperor's sake, listen carefully. You could have killed him last night, I say, stepping back. One shot, this will be over. It's my backup plan, yes, says Von Spink. Ideally, I want him to be taken alive. We need him on board, and to find out what he knows. And risk millions of lives? I snap, glancing over my shoulder as I realize how loud I spoke. Yes, says Von Spink, his face set. Like you say, I can finish this any time I like. I'm his bodyguard. I have been for 20 years, you idiot. Do you think I just happened to be in the right place at the right time? If we can get him out alive, if we can't get him out alive, his corpse will do fine. But we still have 16 days. I didn't realize, I say. You're not meant to. You're a trooper, Cage. Just stick to following orders, says Von Spink. I'll make sure Schaefer and the others can get the Von Strab. You just keep your head down and cover for me. It's your neck on the line, not mine, so you best play it. He stops suddenly and looks up. I follow his gaze. Von Strab is looking at both of us, arms crossed, tapping his foot. What are you two colluding about? He barks. Marshal von Cage was just outlining his plans for tracking down and detaining the interlopers, Your Excellency, Von Spink says, giving me a gentle push in the back. Von Cage? I whisper, holding my ground. It's the name of the noble. Get used to it, Von Spink whispers back. Everybody's bloody Von something or other around here, so pay attention or you'll get confused. I totter forward. After a more hearty push from Von Spink. Glancing past the Overlord, I can see two men wrestling on the ground, clawing and biting at each other, tearing out lumps of hair and scratching at each other's faces. Von Strab notices my gaze. A stroke of genius, though I say it myself, the Overlord says with a smug grin. If they can't decide which of them gets the woman, they should fight like women for the right. The woman in question is watching the fight with distaste, her loose white gown open at the front, to leave little to the imagination. Of course, says Von Strab, leaning close to whisper in my ear. I might just take the girl myself. What do you think? She's certainly a fine woman, I say. The two men are panting heavily, bleeding from dozens of cuts and scratches. They're tousled and growing slower and weaker. Von Strab watches them, a finger held to his pursed lips, in a studied pose of thought. He glances at me and winks. His hand claps together and the two wrestlers stop and look at him. Abysmal. Absolutely abysmal, the Overlord says, as a matter of fact. Von Spink, since neither of these two is man enough to claim her, I claim her for myself. And since they're not man enough for that, I claim their manhood too. Have them castrated. The two men haul themselves to their feet. They grasp at their ragged robes, protesting and pleading. Red-capped guards appear, as if from nowhere, and haul them off, their screams resounding from the white plastered walls and ceiling. Von Strab beckons the woman forward with his finger. She has long dark hair that hangs around her shoulders in curls. Her stomach is tattooed with an interweaving snake and rose. You can have her, Cage, as a reward for dealing with this whole matter so well. The woman looks at me, and her expression is none too pleased. As she takes in my scarred face and blunted nose. You are very generous, I managed to say. It's been many years since I've been with a woman. I'm not sure I remember what to do. Well, don't mess about, Cage. Get on with it, says Von Strab, and my mouth gapes in disbelief. He wants me to do the deed right here? Then to my relief he says, the door behind us, you will find your new bedchamber, through the hall and through the second door to the left. Take your time. I'm sure you've earned it. Seeing a hint of annoyance in the Overlord's eye, the woman steps forward, eyes cast demurely to the ground, and takes my hand. The gathered mock officers and gentry begin to clap and cheer as she leads me through the door. My heart aches and begins the race, the feeling of her hand in mine causing sweat to prickle down my skin. Desires I've not felt for a long time begin to rise. The female's hand is hot and clammy. I can feel her blood rushing through her veins. Her heart pounds as fast as mine, and I can hear her breath begin to shorten from fear of excitement. I don't care which. She opens the door to my chamber, revealing a wide, high-ceilinged room with a ragged-looking pair of armchairs, an ornate nightstand, and a bed the size of a small spaceport. It's covered in stained white covers, decorated with fraying, embroidered flowers. The man lets go of my hand, and crosses to the bed, slipping the robe from her shoulders. She turns and reveals herself to me before lying back onto the sheets. She looks at me, past her generous breasts. I can sense her fear, her unwillingness. You can do what you like with me, Marshal. She lies. Her voice betrays her coldness. I notice cloudy glass goblets and a tarnished silver cutlery on the tray in the nightstand. I smile at her. I will, I say. I leave the bloodied cutlery and shards of glass in a crimson pool on the tray, Someone will have to clean it up for me, I'm sure. I feel spent, exhausted, but I know there's something I've got to do before I can rest. I leave the bedchamber with its blood-soaked sheets and the ragged corpse of the harlot and walk back to the room where I met Von Strab, opening the door. I find it empty, except for the serving boy, who is now crawling across the floor on his hands and knees, picking up crumbs, bones, and a few pieces of discarded food. "Where is Von Strab?" I ask him, and he shrugs. "Dunno," he says, his pompous tone now gone. I walk over to him and grab his curling golden hair in a fist, dragging him to his feet. He squirms in my grasp, and I leave him a little shake to quiet him down. When he goes limp, I twist my wrist so he's looking at me. "Don't make me ask again," I say. Something wet dribbles down his leg onto my foot. He begins to cry. "He'll be in the throne room," he stammers between sobs, pointing to an archway on the right. I let him go. As he turns to crawl away, I kick him in the stomach, turning him over. Pinning him to the ground with my soiled boot, I give him a look. Pulling a cloth from the belt of his tunic, he wipes the piss from my shoe. With another kick, I send him on his way. Walking through the arch, I find myself in a columned gallery overlooking a deep pit on one side. Naked bodies writhe and moan on the ground. At first, I think it sounds of pleasure, but I notice the fattened, blood-slicked forms of rats weaving through them, the morass of exposed humanity. They're being eaten alive. None of them seem to be putting up any kind of fight as the rats, some with multiple tails, 2 heads, elongated fangs, and other mutations gnaw at their skin, nibble on their fingers and toes, or burrow their way into the warm guts. As I stand watching the tableau, caught up in the decaying artistry and beauty of the scene, I have to tear my gaze away, remembering that I have an important errand before I can take all this pleasure for granted. I find the throne room at the end of the gallery. It looks to have been a warehouse sometime in the past. A mezzanine runs around for a higher level, partly blocked off by the collapsed roof. Metal girders crisscross the wide span of the ceiling, held up by more steel beams. Light green paint peels off the walls, revealing crumbling dark red bricks. The floor is tiled with white squares, greening at the edges. The space is littered with detritus. A few decaying bodies are slumped here and there are clothes scattered all over, some of them neatly folded and stacked, others ripped and torn, thrown haphazardly everywhere, or in half-burned piles. At the end of the hall, Von Strab is sitting in a large, plain chair, vacantly looking around the room. He hears my boots clicking on the tiles as I cross to him, and he looks up quickly, a haunting expression on his face. He seems to recognize me only after a moment, and relaxes. His left cheek is bruised, and his eyes red-rimmed, as if he'd been crying. "Where's Von Spink?" I asked, looking around. "Oh, he had something to attend to. Over in the oil sump district," says Von Strab. "How much do you trust him?" I say, bending forward and whispering in a conspiratorial fashion. "With all my life, every day," he replies, looking at me with a quizzical expression. "Why?" "I think he's a traitor," I say, looking to the left and right as if someone might overhear us. "I think he wants to kill you." "I don't believe you," Von Strab says, shaking his head. "But he confided in me earlier about a plot of his," I say, taking the gamble. "He's in league with Colonel Schaefer." "I know he is," hisses Von Strab. "Keep down your voice. He's trying to get me out of here, isn't he?" I can't think of anything to say for a moment, taken aback by this admission. "You mean you want to go back?" I say, amazed. "They'll kill you for sure." "I have nothing to fear," Von Strab says, pulling himself haughtily. "Yorick may be their golden boy at the moment, but he has no breeding at all, and that will shine through. Besides, what makes you think Schaefer will keep me? Once I'm out of Acheron, that's another business entirely." "But why risk it?" I say, trying to keep the pleading out of my voice. "If I stay here, they'll kill me for sure. You know that." It doesn't have to be that way, I say, crouching in front of the overlord, leaning forward with a hand on the arm of his chair. I can get you out of here. I'll deal with von Spink and Schaefer, no problem. You'll be a lord again, and I can be your right-hand man. Think of the pleasures we could indulge in. And the orcs, what will you do about them? He says, spittle flying from his lips. What about them? I say, rocking back on my heels. Ditch them or bring them with us. It's up to you. You don't understand, says von Strab, nervously looking past me. Who do you think von Spink is trying to rescue me from? I squat there in silence, absorbing this information, trying to work out what it means. I give up. What does that mean? I ask von Strab. Who has a manic look in his eye now, and is gripping the arms of the chair so tightly his pudgy knuckles have gone white. I didn't have any choice, did I? He says. His eyes rove around the large hall. Yorick was trying to have me tried as a traitor. I tried my best, I really did. This is my planet, not his, damn it. But he wanted me dead, so I had to get away. It seemed like the only choice was with Thraka. When he said he was going to return, I was overjoyed. But he was going to kill me. I had to tell him about the orbital defenses, about the battle fleet. What was I supposed to do? You did the right thing, I say to him, soothing him with my soft tone. Like you said, you would have died. You have to look after yourself. Precisely, Cage, precisely, he says, finally meeting my gaze. He gave me Acheron back, and the nobles flocked here. But he didn't leave me alone. You think those green-skinned thugs are my guards? They're my jailers. They have a leader. Urkhug, they call him. He's as brutal as Thraka himself. He's not as stupid. Not like you would think an orc to be. He thinks, he listens, and he tells Thraka what I'm up to. I had to concoct the whole army of liberation scheme, so I could at least get some of my own men. But Urkhug keeps me away from them. His brute squads are barracked with them, and they intimidate them. We'll take care of it, you and me, I assure him, radiating confidence. I have been in deeper shit than in this. I'll have your army licked into shape in no time, and I'll personally take care of von Spink and this Urkhug if you want me to. There's a clatter of heavy boots behind me, and von Strab fell silent, sitting in his chair and assuming an air of indifference. I swivel around on my haunches and see a group of 6 orcs entering through the archway. The one in front is a head taller than the rest, an immense green bastard with arms as thick as my legs. Scalps hang from his heavy belt, and his hands are covered with spiked knuckle dusters. Ah, Urkhug, there you are, beams von Strab, stepping off the chair and bringing me to my feet with a hand on my arm. I was just telling Cage about who you are. He's my new marshal, by the way. Shut up, grunts the orc leader, shoving me aside and barging into von Strab. He forces him back in the chair. My boys have been telling me things. Who are these killers that have come for you? Who's him? He jabs a clawed thumb over his shoulder at me. I'm suddenly acutely aware of the green hunks of muscle looming up behind me. I feel nothing from them, except their stench. You'd think I could sense their rage, their bestial hungers, but they're as blank as the chair von Strab sits on. It's not like they love violence or loathe their enemies. It's just what they do, without thought, without feeling. That's Cage. I just told you, Urkhug, says von Strab, squirming as a rope of saliva drips from the orc's jutting jaw to his face. He's the one who told me about the assassins. That's why I made him a marshal. He killed some of my boys, says Urkhug, turning on me. Behind him, von Strab gets to his feet and tries to walk away, but Urkhug reaches out a clawed hand and plants it onto his chest, thrusting him back to his chair. I killed them, I say, stepping forward and staring the orc straight in his red eyes. With my knife, not a gun. You're too small, the orc says. My boys could eat you alive. There's only one thing that orcs really understand. I drive my forehead into Urkhug's jaw, snapping a tooth. The orc squints down at me, his jaw working as he thinks, his fangs carving grooves in the thick flesh of his lips. He starts to laugh, a roiling, gurgling noise, and slaps me hard on the shoulder. You got a good one this time, Urkhug says, his congratulatory slap sending me staggering away. I like him. With the orc one over, my next job is a little easier. Would you like to join us? I say, looking at Urkhug. We are just about to conduct an inspection of the oil sump district. Check on the security, that sort of thing. Von Straub's eyes widen as he remembers that's where Von Spink is waiting for the colonel. I'm sure Urkhug and his boys have something they should be doing. Isn't that right, Urkhug? He says, quickly frowning in concentration. He's probably trying to work out whether I've intentionally betrayed him or not, or whether this is some elegant plan to help him escape. Inspection sounds good, says Urkhug. Me and the boys will come with you. Lead the way, Your Excellency, I say to Von Straub, and I can see the horror in his eyes as it dawns on him that we're not playing for the same team anymore. There's one more player on my team, and that's me. Just like old times, looking out for number one. Frag the colonel's mission. It's me. I put myself again first. Von Straub tries to come up with something else for Urkhug to busy himself with, but the orc leader is single-minded and determined to make a sweep of the sumps located a few levels below us. Ultimately, Von Straub is just as selfish and power-hungry. Once Von Spink and the colonel are dead, he'll probably forget all about his stupid idea of giving himself up. With my help and encouragement, we'll get out of Akron before the bombardment hits and start anew. Perhaps we'll be able to make something in Hades. Or maybe we could return to Akron after the devastation has been unleashed and lead the scattered survivors to a new great life in gratitude and servitude. People in that position need strong leadership and will accept it from just about anyone who shows them the way. Yes, with the fire still burning in the hive, Acheron will be ripe for the plucking. I try to urge the orcs on without making it look as if that's what I'm trying to do. I have no doubt that Von Spink is down here waiting to meet up with the colonel. With any luck, we'll catch him before the rendezvous, and we'll be able to set a trap for the last chancers. I'm also interested to see whether Von Spink blows his cover. I reckon he won't. The orcs seem to know their way around pretty well, which hasn't been at all that surprising since they've been in Acheron, since the invasion began and Von Straub returned. We haven't passed any substantial doors or gates, and I haven't seen any boundary walls, so I guess we're still inside the Overlord's palace. We pass by a few areas, plunge into blackness, and I can feel chill draughts flowing from the darkness. The air damp and clinging. I guess the episode at the Firefather's little slave empire has began to have its effects. The power from his furnaces is gone now, leaving areas of the Underhide devoid of light and warmth. The air gets even more stale as we descend, mildew and the tang of oil hanging in my nostrils. We pass through huge riveted steel tanks, the steady thump, thump, thump of unseen engines vibrating through the floor and walls. This must be the Sump Oil District. There are a few of Von Straub's red-capped Army of Liberation soldiers stationed at intersections and doorways. They give us surprised, nervous looks as we approach. They look especially worried when Urkhug and his boys give them menacing stares and growls. I wonder if they're on the whole plan, or if they've simply been duped by Von Spink. I bet their loyalties will be different if they learn that Akron was soon going to be turned into a smoldering lump of molten metal and rock, reduced to rubble by plasma and cyclonic bombardment. In fact, as soon as I sort out this current situation, I think I'll make it a priority to spread the news as far as possible. Not only will it be a stampede of chaos of godly proportions, resulting in thousands of wonderful deaths. But the uproar would give us the opportunity to take our leave from this god-forsaken place. As we take a ride down a flight of steps in another sublevel, the walls oozing with sickly green fluid, the corpses of rats and other vermin stuck to the adhesive flow, I wonder whether we should take Urkug and his boys with us. It might be worth getting them to help in the escape. They might not be that bright, but they are good hired brawn, which could come in handy. Since they've outlived their usefulness, they can be disposed of easily enough. I don't want to feel Gazgul leering over my shoulder, watching my every move through the eyes of his green-skinned enforcer. The sump area is a maze of intersecting corridors. As we ask after von Spink, the men of the Army of Liberation wander around, guarding doorways and access shafts, following their grunted instructions, some of them contradictory. We eventually find our way down a winding set of steps. I note that it's been several minutes since we've seen any of the red-capped soldiers. Through an archway, I can see von Spink. He's pacing back and forth in an open chamber. There is a sump overflow pipe jutting just downwards from the center of the walls. He seems agitated, skipping from foot to foot, glancing around. I know he's waiting for Schaefer to make contact somehow. And it looks like the last chances are running a little late. When he sees us, he freezes. Just seeing how your sweep is going along, von Spink, says the Overlord, with a weak attempt at a cheery wave. It looks like everything is in hand, so we'll be going along now. I have to stall them. I know Urkug won't want to hang around too long, so I need to keep him busy. I turn to the orc, keeping one eye on von Spink at the same time. So, you're one of Gazgul's top boys, then, I say. He squints down at me with his blood-red eyes. The boss knows, or I can take care of myself. He grunts. He stomps forward and slaps a meaty paw on Von Strab's shoulder, making him wince. Emperor and me have got everything stitched up, ain't we? Von Strab has began to regain some of his senses, and a cunning look enters his eye. The broken, slumped man I found in the room is disappearing before me as he straightens his shoulders, then glances at von Spink before, addressing the orc leader. Certainly, Urkug, certainly, the Overlord says. We need each other, don't we? And we need to make sure nothing happens to me. We need to search this area thoroughly. You heard something? Uruk says, cocking his head to one side, his lips rippling as he thinks. Assassins might be coming here to kill me, says von Strab. I'm sure von Spink has everything under control, and the soldiers are doing a fine job, but I would feel safer if you were to have your boys join the search. Von Spink and the Overlord are trying to get rid of the orcs, but I definitely want to be around for the meeting with the last chancers. I haven't got a weapon, and if Urkug leaves, I'll be alone with von Spink. The Colonel will be here soon, and the Overlord will be whisked away. Then I'll be stuck here, or worse. On the other hand, I say quickly, stepping forward, it might also be good to make sure the Emperor has bodyguards close, in case the killers sleep through the net. Urkug pauses, trying to decide what to do. I'll have von Spink to watch out for me, says von Strab, walking over to pat the gunman on the shoulder. I'm sure he won't let anything untoward happen to me. Urkug is still undecided. A glance at von Spink confirms he's getting increasingly nervous. His lack of calm is betrayed by his furtive glances toward the outflow pipe and his fingers covering over the holster. Von Strab, on the other hand, is a picture of calm composure, the statesman in him coming to the fore. The Emperor must be our primary concern, I say, crossing the chamber's stand. On the other side of von Spink, I've been with this team. They have a native guide, and they will slip in our midst without warning. They're like shadows, like ghosts. Just as I finish, Urkug's nostrils flare, and his pointed ears twitch as he frowns. He looks at the other orcs, who are also sniffing the air. There's a resounding thump from beyond the wall that echoes through the pipe to us. It's accompanied by a small cloud of dust and shower of gravel spilling from the end. A moment later, Erasmus comes tumbling into view, his servo skull flying from his hands and clattering across the floor. I pounce first, clamping a hand over his mouth and dragging him over to one side. There's a pregnant pause as Urkog and his greenskins pull pistols and cleavers from their belts. We should take them alive, hisses Von Spink, and surprisingly the orc nods in agreement. Spluttering on the cloud of dust, Brownie follows next. His look of astonishment when he sees us is priceless. Urkog steps forward and smashes his pistol across Dunmore's jaw, hurling him to the ground, out cold. There's a shuffling and a rattling down the pipe, and I guess the others are trying to decide whether or not to come down or not. Urkog waves his orcs in close around the opening, waving them back out of sight. It's Cage, I say in a loud whisper. I've got something waiting for you down here. I hear a muffled exchange of words that I can't quite make out, following by a series of bumps. My ruse has worked. At first, Finn, then the Colonel drops in the inflow. The Colonel takes everything in with a single glance, his gaze resting on me. There's no accusation in his eyes, no resignation. He simply looks at me with his blank expression and raises his hands away from his bolt pistol and power sword. Kindrug is next, still nursing his wounded leg, along with the Underhiver, Derflin Kerk. The tool trader gives a panicked squeak and turns to haul himself back into the pipe, but one of Urik's boys grabs his ragged robe and hauls him back, dumping him to the ground and placing a heavy boot next to him to stop him from crawling away. Next is Kelf, who delicately slithers out of the pipe, with his back to us. As he turns around, his jaw drops. Without hesitation, he sweeps his hand up, pulling back his headscarf to reveal his warp eye. To my left, Von Strab and Von Spink both start screaming, flinging themselves to the ground with their hands clawing over their faces. Urkog stands memorized for a moment. Then his eyes glaze over, a rope of drool dripping from his lips. He topples to the ground, stiff as a board. The others react with a mixture of terrified wails and angry roars, firing their pistols at unreal phantoms. One of them stares at me for a long moment before his eyeballs explode and it crumples to the floor in a heap. The other last chancers are on similar comatose or panic states. Brownie is squatting on the ground, gibbering softly. Kindrug starts tearing wildly at the bandages on his leg, driven by some personal mania. I just look at the navigator, the swirling, ever-changing deep vortex in his skull. Nothing new for me. I can feel the warmth of its immaterial stare wash over me as he turns in my direction. This time it is Kelth's eyes, who widen in horror, seeing my true form. Demon! He hisses, recoiling, his natural eyes scanning left and right for some avenue of escape. Get away from me, foulest of the foul! That's enough of this bollocks, I say, stepping forward and delivering a sharp punch in the navigator's face, breaking his nose and sending him to the ground. I kick him in the side. Snatching the scarf from his limp hand, I quickly bind his third eye again, pulling the rope from his rags to tie his hands behind his back. Looking up, I see everyone else in the room is starting to recover. His boots thumping on the ferrocrete. Ohebs leaps out of the pipe, wrapping his arms around my shoulder and bundling me to the ground. The needles being driven into my head are total agony, and I scream at the top of my lungs, wrestling against the weight bearing down on me. My eyes are dark, full of stinging pain, and my own voice feels muted and distant in my ears. I thrash around, feeling something constricting me as my sight slowly returns. Suddenly, the weight lifts, and I can see the face of Ohebs next to mine. He's crouched over me. A trail of blood dribbles from his nostrils, and one of his eyes is cloudy. What? I manage to say, my voice suddenly unnaturally loud, ringing in my ears. More pain stabs through my head, but I ignore it, concentrating on Ohebs. He covers my mouth with his hand to stop me from speaking. Shut up! Listen hard, he says, the words coming so quickly and quietly, I almost can't understand them. You're a psyker. You've been possessed by a demon. I am a soul guard, an earthing rod for psychic energy. When you're away from me, the demon will try to come back. You must fight it, believe me. Try with all your will and soul. I'm in a bare chamber, looking at a pipe jutting from one wall. Just ahead of me, the other last chancers are lying on the ground, moaning and clutching their heads and faces. There's a handful of orcs nearby, recovering from something. I can see Von Strab behind them, kneeling on the ground and vomiting. His bodyguard, Von Spink, is crouched behind him with his revolver pointing at me. One of the orcs regained enough presence of mind to drag Ohebs from me. Retching, the last chancer doubles up, and I see blood clotting in his ears and strange burn-like marks on the back of his neck. He glances back at me, his left eye now completely white, pain etched into his face. I feel weak, sickened, and dizzy, and push myself to my feet to stagger away from him. The orcs have their pistols in their hands again, surrounding the last chancers. I fall to all fours, resting my head against the cold ground. Then I notice my hands. They're almost claw-like. The nails extend and point, the skin thin and brittle, the bones threatening to break through the wasted flesh. Shaking uncontrollably, I push myself to my feet and stagger to the wall. Leaning against it, breathing hard, I look over my shoulder, vaguely remembering Oheb's words. Something about a demon? The largest orc is disarming the last chancers, casually tossing their weapons aside. Three red-capped soldiers run into the chamber, lasguns ready. They stop short at the sight. They look at the orcs, then Von Spink and the Overlord, trying to work out what's going on. It's Von Strab who takes the lead. These are the assassins, he says. Lock them up. We shall deal with them later. Von Spink, Cage, Urkog, we have plans to make. Archeron is proving too troublesome. It is time the Army of Liberation made its mark. The last chance has been bundled away, presumably to the cells where I woke up. Von Strab leads myself, Von Spink, and Urkog back through the sumps and through the walls and galleries of his palaces, their grisly, bloody decorations. A throne carved from dark reddish wood sits at one end. The walls are covered with heavy drapes. Von Spink carefully closes the door behind us as we enter. I have only flashes of recollections from earlier. The last time we come together, I remember there was a girl, and I have an image of Von Strab on a throne weeping, but nothing else. Outwardly, I try to keep my expression as calm as possible, but on the inside, my thoughts are in turmoil. Oheb's warning comes back in full. A demon is inside me. I don't know when or how, but it doesn't really matter. I know the blackouts, the nausea, were tied to my witching abilities. Now it makes more sense. Something inside me is wrestling for control of my body. Even now, its corruption is lurking inside of me. He began to fight it, but how? How can I fight something I don't even understand? Already, I'm changing. Its presence inside me is warping my flesh. I can feel it now, and I know it is there. My hands are becoming obscene claws, and I can feel bones breaking and knitting inside them elsewhere. The thump of my heart sounds different, faster, more erratic. There's a pain in my chest I've never felt before. It feels like my ribs are fusing together. Never before have I been so aware of myself and my body. Von Spink is agitated in the extreme. Not once does he tear his gaze from me, except to glance cautiously at Urkug. His fingers are hovering over the pistol in his belt in anticipation of drawing the weapon. He looked dangerous enough when I saw him before, but in this mood, he looks downright murderous and totally unpredictable. As they discuss the withdrawal from the hive, I let my mind dwell on the plans. The Overlord, the Inquisitor, Bodyguard, and the Orc leader are all ignoring me as I try to straighten things out in my head. Although my thoughts keep returning to the creature festering inside of me, I've never been one for politics. but I think I can figure out what is going on by piecing together snippets of remembered observations and conversations. Through von Spink, or whatever his real name is, von Strab has heard about the planned bombardment of Archeon. He wants to get out, understandably, and having gained von Spink's confidence, will double cross him before he is handed over to the Imperial authorities. That much makes sense so far, and explains his remarkable recovery when things turned awry. He's as mad as a bag of spanners. The Overlord is certainly not experienced when it comes to scheming. He probably has at least one backup plan at any given time. His allegiances, however temporary, with von Spink and the Colonel, allow him to shake off the orcs and the grip of Gazgul. For his part, as far as I know, von Spink is trying to get von Strab out of Archeon as well, to prevent its destruction and win a battle, or win a little coup of his own over his rivals who want to flatten the hive. He said he'd kill the Overlord if necessary, but I'm doubtful. He seems more likely to throw caution to the wind and just cut and run. I'm pretty sure there's more than a little self-interest here, and obviously wants to save his own skin. With Urkog hanging around like a fart in an APC, I don't think he's willing to pull his trigger and risk his own neck. As far as I can tell, Urkog is the only straightforward one here, which isn't surprising. His orders are from Gazgul. And stuck in the middle of this are the last chancers locked up somewhere below him, or why Urkog turned up at the meeting point. But it's obviously the plan that's gone to hell and isn't coming back at all. All of which leaves me thoroughly fragged as far as I can tell. I have no weapon, and little chance of getting one at the moment. I haven't a doubt that if I make the wrong move, von Spink will take me down in an instant. Trouble is, I haven't got a fragging clue what the wrong move might be. Urkog's the same, so that's double the fun. And I can't even begin to work out how I'm going to figure in von Strab's schemes. At best, the three of them consider me a disposable asset. At worst, a potential threat. The obvious course of action is to get the frag out of here and leave them to it. That's easier said than done. Though with von Spink and Urkog both keeping an eye on me, the only friends, for want of a better term, I have are the last chancers, and I'm not even sure where they are. As far as I can tell, the only way out of this is for me to get the plan rolling again. If I can kill or see von Strab, the others will be the best way of getting out of here. So I best start listening to what's happening. Otherwise, things could get even further out of control. Narrow thinking, von Strab is saying. What should we care if they all die? They are my army, and their duty is to protect me. If that is to be a diversion, then so be it. You never know. It might actually come good and do some damage to the lapdogs of Yarrick. If there's a fight, my boys will show you what they're made of, says Urkog, thumping a clawed fist in the palm of his other hand. We's not had a proper fight for ages, and the lads is getting bored. But throwing away your forces just to cover your escape could prove unwise, Your Excellency, says von Spink, his smooth tone having returned as he tries to manipulate the Overlord. We cannot guarantee what sort of reception you'll receive when we end up relocating somewhere. I don't trust anyone anymore, says Urkog. There's been too much secret talking, and I don't want no more of it. You can come with me as well, I say. The orc's bucket-jawed head swings in my direction, fixing me with an evil stare. Behind him, von Spink gives an almost imperceptible nod, confirming that he thinks we can take out the orc between us if necessary. In fact, as I think about it, it would be to our advantage to remove the orc leader as early as possible. If you don't trust us, that is. I don't, Urkog says. Let's do it now. No more talking. I was right. They were being kept down in the same cells where I had been for Emperor knows how long. Von Spink leads the way, down to the ornate audience chambers and portrait galleries, then into the slime-covered stone depths the lower levels below. The three of us stop at the column of the steps, leading to a cell-lined walkway. Urkug pulls his pistol from his belt, and Von Spink hands me the keys. I think you're doing something wrong. I plug you, all right? The orc says, and I nod. I walk the line of the cells to the third one on the left, which Von Spink tells me is where I'll find the colonel. I pause outside the door, the heavy brass key between my fingers, figuring out how to make this work. I can't guarantee Von Spink can take out Urkug with his revolver. Even a point-blank shot to the head isn't always fatal to an orc. On the other hand, if Urkug nails one of us with his heavy pistol, it's going to be all over pretty damn quickly. I think perhaps the best way will be to lure Urkug toward the cell so that Von Spink can perhaps shoot him in the neck, while the colonel and I tackle him from the rear. A quick shout would bring the huge orc running in our direction, and then it'll be up to Von Spink. After that, we'll release the others and set out. If we can get Von Strab on his own, I doubt we'll have a problem keeping him safe and around. He may be planning to double-cross Von Spink and avoid being taken in, but the last chancers will make that nearly impossible. Of course, we'll still have to get him back to friendly lines intact, but since we managed to actually get here against the odds, a few kilometers to the Imperial cordon outside the Archon shouldn't be too difficult. I slip the key into the lock, trying to keep my hand steady. The lock clunks loudly as I turn the key, and I tense as I pull the door outwards. As the sickly light from the glow globe seeps in the room, I see the colonel. He's sitting with his back to the wall, facing the door. His eyes bore straight into me from the dim light. I stand there for a moment as we look at each other, the colonel's blank face betraying no clue to his mood. He stands up slowly to straighten his rags, as if we were still in uniform, and takes a step forward. I hold up a hand to stop him, swinging the door almost behind me, cutting off all but a sliver of light. As I turn around, the colonel leaps forward, his right fist slamming to my jaw, blocking me backwards. I throw my right hand to block the next punch, a fraction too late. As I open my mouth to tell him to stop, he wades in with a boot, forcing me to sway to one side. I catch his ankle in my left hand. Instinctively, I bring my leg around to sweep his standing leg, but he leans in forward and catches my knee with a blocking forearm. Without pause, he attacks again. With a smile, I lunge forward, the fingers of my hand driving toward Schaefer's eyes. I can get this body to work faster than he ever imagined. I go on the offensive, striking with left and right blows, taking him on the chin and above the eyes. Turning my attention lower, I drive a fist into his gut, lifting him to his toes, and then slam a punch down the side of his head. Idiot! I hiss at him, driving a booted foot to his chest. I was going to get you out of here. Now that's never going to happen. I'll enjoy watching you die. You can't blame me, I say, grabbing the front of his ragged clothes and slamming into the wall. I'm not the Cage I used to be. He breaks my grip and forces his arms between us, throwing me backwards. I know, he says. You are a creature of the abyss, a weak, despicable cacodemon. I want him back. Fiend of Horus, leech of the void. But I'm right here, I say with a laugh. I'm Cage. You know it. This is what I'm really like. This is what I want to be like. This is what is inside of me, in my soul. It was easy to release myself. My psychic gifts saw to that. Now I can be free. Free from you, from the accursed emperor, from duty and guilt. You are never free from me, snarls Schaefer, smashing a fist into my chest and cracking a rib. I laugh. It won't take long to heal, now that I've unleashed my true potential. A few more modifications and this body will be perfect. Ever since I met you, I wanted to do this, I say, cracking my bloody knuckles. Sure, you remember. I stuck a knife in you, This time I won't bother with the knife. I take a step forward, but at that moment light spills in the room and I freeze. Urkug and von Spink crowd in the room, their pistols drawn. I step back and lower my hands to my sides. He wouldn't cooperate, so I'm trying to force it out of him. I say quickly, possibly too quickly, as von Spink's eyes narrow in suspicion. I just need a couple more minutes. I think you've done enough, says von Spink, pushing past Urkug to the room. The orc grunts in annoyance and shoves me to one side with the cram. I don't like this. You stop now, Urkug says, waving me forward. I say we shoot them now and forget about them. No, says von Spink, stepping in front of the orc's raised pistol. The Emperor wants to dispose of them himself. You heard him say so. We'll get rid of them this way. And then we'll get out of here and start again. Something gurgles in the orc's throat as he considers, and then he backs off, lowering his guard. We go soon, he says, tonight. I might get bored of your Emperor if I have to hang around here any longer. I get rid of things when I'm bored with them. Schaefer is lying on the ground, clasping his broken arm. He is looking at us with shimmering abhorrence. Von Spink motions with his pistol. A few hours later, a great entourage is making its way through the Underhive to the massive fire chasm called the Valley. Soldiers and courtiers, numbering over 100, file through the twisting corridors, across silent machine rooms, down spiraling stairs, and along crumbling boulevards. Von Strab walks at the head of the procession, and some of the Army of Liberation are obviously clearing the route ahead. With him are 4 bearers, carrying a patched canvas shelter over his head. The purpose of this becomes clear when we pass through a high chamber, its vaulted ceiling about 200 meters above us. It writhes with bats, millions of them, and their shit rains down on us in steady drips, splattering our uniforms and robes. I try not to look up. Flanked by orcs and redcaps, we wave our way through a twisting causeway that arches over a desolate, cratered hall. I can see a few ragged figures slipping between the shadows, digging in the pockets of earth with small shovels. Who are they? I ask, looking at the balustrade into the dim depths. The man behind me stops and leans over. He's dressed in a bright orange uniform coat with jeweled roses at the lapels. A cluster of medallions, many of them tarnished, hang on his chest, and he holds a hat under his arm. I can't help but notice he has no trousers or boots on, and his left big toe is pointing out a hole in his damp, stained hose. Bone prospectors, he says, and then, seeing my ignorance, continues. The fighting in the Underhive has moved around a lot in the last 3 days, and this was one of the earlier battles. About 150 dead orcs, maybe 1,000 human remains. They were all buried in the muck when the level above collapsed, dropping the contents of the sewer rats into them. They dig around the stuff looking for valuables. Apparently, there are some people who cook the bones down to eat, for glue, that kind of thing. Just my sort of place. Shame it has to go, I say. Go? My new companion asks. What's going? Nothing really, I say with a smile, turning away and rejoining the column. At the front of the line, chained head and foot, come the last chancers. Kelth is easily picked out, a head taller than the rest, with a crude iron mask, a lot like a pail chained over his head. I guess Von Strab doesn't want any other attack of warped jeebies. The colonel walks proudly at their head. The others, skulking around, avoiding any attention, or looking around the surrounding with startling gapes. Brownie looks like he hasn't gotten a clue what's going on. He keeps stopping and looking over his shoulder to take Erasmus behind him, and the orcs turn up and club him to get moving again. Somehow, Spooge is still carrying that bloody, broken servo skull tucked under his arm. Before the little fragger dies, I want to smash it into pieces in front of him. I want to tear out all the mechanics and gears and cognitive analyzers and scatter them to the winds. Maybe then he'll understand it's not fun and games to be a soldier. The others are obscured by oppressive people, mock military officers and local dignitaries, some of them prodding the prisoners with walking canes or spitting on them, as we eventually reach a large semicircular arena with an ornate iron fence around the outside. Beyond that, I can see the jagged, bridged chasm of the valley, bathed in a red glow from below. A walkway jets out about 15 meters over the artificial canyon, lined with ropes on each side. The Overlord's lackeys and retainers spread out across the large balcony, pushing and elbowing each other to get the best view of the coming proceedings. Von Strab beckons for me, Von Spink and Urkug to follow him into the gangway. Ahead of us, the last chances are herded along the path to its end. It's immediately clear what Von Strab is intending to do. It's a wonderful feeling, standing above that massive precipice, looking down over the edge in its ruddy depths. The heat drifts up and around me, the air drying my skin. It's the closest I've come to remembering the soaring, gliding freedom of the warp. It's an old memory, tinged with senses that my body no longer possesses. I look up, seeing the roof has collapsed, just a few floors above our heads. Jutting stalactites of metal and ferrocrete point down at me. There's a wonderful stillness, a momentary hush of the underhive. I turn to Von Strab, who stands in front of the last chancers, Von Spenk on one side, Urkug to the other. He opens out his arms, palms held up to the low artificial sky, his head arched back. Behold the great valley of Archon, the Overlord declares. For 100 generations it has brought life and light and warmth to the underhive. Gods have been born in its depths, and blessing bestowed by Robe's priest basking in its holy heat. It has spawned its own creatures, its own tribes, its own prophecies. It is an extension of the will of Armageddon itself. These fiery depths have witnessed births and deaths, marriages and disillusions, miracles and martyrdoms. And now it is time to commit the bodies of Armageddon's enemies to its burning embrace. A great cheer resounds from the gathered dignitaries, echoing from the roof, resounding back from the far wall of the valley. But I can sense the hollowness in their voices. The cheer is as much for the orcs behind them as for the ruler and his rites of execution. Archeon is under the heel of Von Strab, and it wasn't going to be annihilated in 14 days. Brownie is the first in the line of last chancers, and he's starting to realize his predicament. He tries to wipe a hand over his bald scalp, but the chains behind his wrists and ankles stop him. Sweat drips down his face as he looks over the edge. He shuffles backwards and tries to run as Urkug steps forward and grabs him. He shouts, his voice cracking to a scream as the bulky orc calls him towards the lip of the half-bridge. Holding him over the valley, Von Strab makes a theatrical flourish with his hand, and Urkug shoves Brownie over the edge, fleeing him into the empty space. In my mind's eye, he hangs there for a second, mouth stretched open. He tries to flail, his arms and legs, and drops from view, his shriek growing quieter and more hoarse as he falls to his doom. There's banging and clapping from the crowd, cries of shame and kill the traitors. The fear-filled anger washes over me. It is mixed with genuine hatred. I shudder and my eyelids flutter. I glance around to make sure no one noticed. Urkug turns and gives me a gurgling laugh, and Von Strab clamps his hands quickly, like an excited child ready to receive a present. Beside the Overlord, Von Spink looks decidedly irritated, his arms folded across his chest. The Colonel looks typically stoic, jutting his chin forward and regarding Von Strab coolly. Erasmus, behind the Colonel in the line, gives an astonished shout and tries to rush forward, but one of Von Strab's guards steps in and batters him down to the side of the head with the butt of his shotgun. Next up is Kelth, standing there with his head covered, unaware of what's going on. I wonder whether it's a cruelty or a kindness that he can't see what's happening. Maybe it's better for him, which is a shame because the arrogant bastard decides that deserves more suffering in this life. There's polite clapping from the crowd this time, following the Overlord's lead. The ripple of applause seems civilized and tame compared to the emotions I can feel emanating from the crowd. Urkug hoists the lanky navigator above his head, and with a roar, strides to the precipice. Kelth struggles vainly in the grip of the green monster, his chains rattling against the orc's skull. With a triumphant shout, Urkug flexes his powerful muscles and flings the navigator into the void. I laugh, feeling waves of fear washing from the last chancers. It's like a drug, swirling around me, booing against my soul. Casually, the orc strolls back towards the line and grabs the rags of the underhiver, Derek Kerfing. The scrawny man writhes in Urkug's clawed hand, but no effect. With almost contemptuous ease, the orc hurls Kerfling over the chasm, holding his other fist over his head in celebration. There's another great cheer and brash hooting from the audience, and hats are tossed in the air in celebration. I stop to see that it's the colonel who's next, Urkug stomping back from the end of the walkway, clenching his fist in anticipation. Wait! I shout out, and the orc pauses. Everyone looks at me as I stride forwards. I think this honor should be mine. Von Spenk gives me a curious look, perhaps thinking this is some minute gamble to save the last chancers. I'm happy to disappoint him. Of course, Marshal Cage, says von Strab with an extravagant wave. You not only deserve it, but you have earned it. I walk forwards, my eyes focused on the colonel, and he returns my stare. Cool hatred burns there, willing me to explode from the sheer force of my will. I smile at him, and then he smiles at me. A few meters from the colonel, I remember that Ohebs is still alive. Frag! Like a drowning man bursting the surface of a tossing sea, I awake with a gasp of breath. With a force of will, I cling to the memories of the departing demon, and through the pain surging through my heart and head, I remember everything. In a single moment of clarity, I feel myself more aware of who and what I am than I ever have been in my life. In a single glance, I see the colonel looking at me, a snarl on his lips. Next to him, Erasmus cowers, tears streaming down his now sunken cheeks. To my right is von Strab, with von Spink just behind him. And ahead of me is the massive orc, Urkug. I can feel the heat of the distant fire chasm washing over the edges of the walkway. Sweat prickles in my skin. I can taste the blood from my bleeding gums, where my sharpened fangs bite into them. My blood feels tense and strong, twisted and warped from the demon. In that single moment, my entire soul becomes focused on itself, like a collapsing warp hole. Suddenly, I understand everything. I look at Ohebs and see the blank white orb of his eye and the scars lift across Ohebs, and I see Finn standing tall beside the anti-psyker, a haunting look in his eye as he gazes into the wideness of the valley. His nightmare of open space is about to become a reality. Then there's Spooge, the last weeks of hardship etched into his face. Gone are the rounded edges of his blubbery cheeks. Still mortally afraid and caught up in something far beyond what he could have comprehended a year ago, he nevertheless manages to spit at me. He cradles the servo skull of his father like a totem, protecting it to the last. And then there's the colonel, cold, hard as a rock, unflinching and remorseless. A man who has endured pain, hardship, and injury for 300 years. A man who has dedicated his life to the Emperor and never once asked why. His faith is more solid than the foundations of a hive city. His body has been broken innumerable times, and yet he stayed alive. They have healed him and thrown him back into the eternal war. He has never failed. It all becomes as clear as crystal in that moment of awakening. Sacrifice is what the Imperium is built on. The sayings are all true. The blood of martyrs is the seed of the Imperium. The loyal slave learns to love the lash. Only in death does duty end. For 10,000 years we have endured. Sometimes we have thrived. Others merely survived. For 100 centuries we have fought and died, spilt the blood of our enemies and our own over an uncountable number of battlefields. Mankind has sacrificed itself for itself so that it might last for another generation and another and another. Those sacrifices are for no greater cause than the acts themselves. It is done in the unspoken hope that someday, perhaps 10,000 years from now, a generation will live without sacrifice, and mankind's destiny is fulfilled for eternity. The Emperor will not remember you by your medals and diplomas, but by your scars. It is not only in death that we offer our lives to him, but also in life. We are not judged merely by the manner of our deaths, but we do not earn his eternal grace merely by dying in his name. It is by the way we live out our lives before we die that determines who we were. It is easy to sacrifice a body, for it's nothing more than a mortal shell to test our soul. But to sacrifice your life, your death, is the ultimate test of faith. It is a test. I have always failed. I have lied and cheated and killed my fellow men for my own reasons. I have squandered the opportunities for glory that I was given. Time and time again, I stood upon the precipice of true sacrifice and turned away. Von Strab's look of triumph turns to horror as I fling my arms around him, lifting him off the ground. I see von Spenk's astonished face flash past as I drive forwards with the Overlord in my arms, the panicked bellows of Urkhug bellowing in my ears. His legs hit the rope barrier and buckle, and my momentum carries us forward, toppling us head over heels into the precipice. Now I truly understand what it means to have a last chance. I am glad I finally took it.